Before we begin, we want to give a content warning that we will be discussing sexual violence and other issues that may be upsetting and triggering. If you need help, please feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. Please take care of yourself. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Teal Talk. I'm your host, Lori Hamami, the Communications and Resource Coordinator. And with me I have
Taylor Ucker-Lauderman, Chief Engagement Officer.
Co-host, my partner in crime, my teammate. We also have a familiar face, but familiar voice, our Director of Training and Member Engagement, Natasha Larson. You may remember her from our episode about the self-care retreat. We just couldn't get enough of Natasha and had to have her back on to chat with us today. Today's episode is going to be all about what exactly does it mean to be a member of a coalition, and just kind of talking through that process of membership and accreditation and all those big words that if you're not in this field, you may not understand. I started out by throwing the word coalition into Google and got the definition of a group of people who join together for a common cause. And I feel like that does a pretty good job of describing exactly what a coalition is. But Natasha, if you could give your own definition of what a coalition is, what would you say?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know, when I was hearing you read that definition from online, I was like, yes, that ticks all the boxes. I think really thinking about that common goal of coming together, and what makes that so beautiful or unique is that people can come from different disciplines, different fields of study, length of time in the field, things like that. But we're all in this together. It kind of reminds me of our membership campaign marketing, where we talk about connections to trees. Like, we're all here to be in space with one another, to protect one another, to try to build a better community with one another. So yeah, I really resonate with that, and just knowing that we can all be in this together under this uniting cause.
I think what's special about that term too, and us being like the State Sexual Violence Coalition, is that you don't have to be a staff member or like a hired person of OAESV to be a part of this coalition to help us eradicate sexual violence. You know, we have staff, but we are also working together as an entire state to achieve this goal. So could you talk a little bit about what that looks like, and what does membership look like at our coalition?
Absolutely. So yeah, we at the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence have paid staff that are able to work together across the state and provide training and technical assistance, but we cannot do this work alone. And so we are a member-based agency where we ask folks from different disciplines, or just folks that are interested in this work, to come together and help us with this work. So currently in our membership structure, we have accredited rape crisis centers, we have affiliate member organizations, and we have individual members. And I'll talk a little bit about the difference between each of those. But even just to kind of hear who's connected with us, we have 32 accredited rape crisis centers, 26 affiliate members, and 41 individual members. And so it's really great to see different groups of folks come together, different individuals who kind of unite under our mission and vision and want to try to make a safer Ohio. So yeah, I can break down some of those categories of membership if that feels okay with you, or we could take this in a different direction, wherever feels good.
You said break down. I was like, give me a beat. No, you can break it down for us, Natasha.
Amazing. Yes. So The reason why we have these different tiers of membership is it allows us to get a little bit more specific and a little bit more intentional with the types of members that come to our organization. So when we're looking at individual members, this allows, like you were just mentioning, Lori, that freedom and flexibility that maybe it's like a teacher, maybe it's someone who has been impacted or is a co-survivor of sexual violence and they want to do more. We also see, individual attorneys or clinicians who just find this to be an area of focus and passion for them. And so they sign up as an individual member so that they can get our newsletters, so that they can have access to some of our training and technical assistance. They show up for our events and just really are that like champion in their community, and really then their voice is shared across the state. So we love our individual members. It's so great to have them in that role. When we have a couple of folks that come together under an umbrella, so maybe you have folks like there's a large group of counselors that this is a focus. They've been seeing patients who have disclosed sexual violence, and they're like, this is a mission. We want to make sure that we're alignment. That's when we start to see folks become affiliate members. So it's that kind of second tier where you have, more than one person who's really championing these messages. They may be doing community outreach during Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We see a lot of times they may be doing direct support or services for survivors, but maybe they're not offering the full suite of services that we know some of our survivors may need. So that's where that affiliate membership is so valuable, is because, again, it gives flexibility. We have people still engaged, and we also can give them benefits. So again, curated technical assistance from like our prevention teams, our coordinated community response teams, because a lot of them are also connected to other community pieces that are happening. So they can then benefit from being connected with our agency. And then if you are part of a rape crisis center, your dedicated folks that you serve are survivors of sexual violence. You operate things like a 24-hour helpline. You may be doing hospital accompaniment. You're doing that community outreach and awareness, and also providing legal accompaniment or assistance. That's when we start to see those accredited rape crisis centers. So they are that dedicated service in a community. And so it really does take all of us coming to the table to end sexual violence.
As you were talking, I kept thinking of like Patreon, like there's different tiers.
Yeah.
We provide certain resources and public trainings, but to get an even deeper involvement and get trainings that are members only, resources that are members only, it really makes sense to be part of this coalition for sure.
Absolutely.
Can you share a little bit about some of the perks of becoming a member?
Certainly, yeah. So for any members that join, especially during our annual renewal campaign, which will be coming up here shortly, we have a small kind of like token of our appreciation, usually like a small gift that like arrives in the mail, thanking them for their membership. And then we give them kind of a projection to see what in the coming year are things that they can anticipate being a part of, what are some of the other maybe potential benefits or perks of their membership. So a lot of times what we outline is that we allow our members to have a discounted rate when they attend our annual conference, which is a large continuing education like opportunity. It's a huge networking opportunity. We have things like affinity spaces where people can be in community with one another and process through like what are challenges that they see on the day-to-day lives, but then also some amazing community engagement pieces outside of that conference. So we really do try to like highlight that this is a great opportunity to not only gain more education, but also meet people from across the state. We had a lovely opportunity with a sponsorship where folks were able to meet afterwards and do duck pin bowling and chat with a rape crisis center from across the way. And it was just a really lovely organic experience. So that's something that we're able to offer for our members. We also try to make sure to let folks know when we have things like Advocacy Day and let them know that their voice is really wanted at the table, and making opportunities to meet with legislators and talk about what's been going on in their communities and why certain policy pieces are so valuable and for them to consider. One of the other places, like you said, I'm kind of on my second go around for the podcast because one of our member benefits was offering a self-care retreat specifically for our rape crisis centers, knowing that they are doing all of these services in an environment that can be so challenging, where trying to get services to folks, there are barriers within systems we wanted to make sure that they had that opportunity to be seen, to be thanked for the work that they do, and to rest. So that's a huge benefit that we are now moving forward with offering on an annual basis to make sure that we can be in space with one another and share like what are the ways that like refuel us so we can come back and continue to do this work at the highest level we can. We also share for our members a space called Collective Calls. Within Collective Calls, not only are we offering continuing education opportunities, but again, there are times where you can be in space, in a connection space with folks who maybe are doing engaging men's work, for folks who are creating SARTs or CCR teams and chatting about what the challenges are and connecting and getting technical assistance. So we kind of really lean into being that training and technical assistance provider. And like you said, Lori, kind of those tiers of benefit get higher and more specific and more hands-on as we have higher levels of membership. So really thinking about those affiliates and rape crisis centers, what are the things that they're hoping to achieve in 2025? You know, some folks may have a need or opportunity to do some marketing campaigns or looking at some of their accessibility pieces at their agencies. And we can be hand in hand with them, helping them like create that so that it doesn't feel so cumbersome.
No matter what field you work in or what job you have or what phase of life you're in, like you will come in contact to a survivor, whether you know it or not. You don't only have to be an advocate at a rape crisis center to be involved in this vision of eradicating sexual violence. I think back to when I used to do work as a news reporter. Had I known about OAESV right out of college, it would have been a great benefit to also be a member so that when I was out in the field writing stories about survivors, I had that trauma-informed lens that I didn't get when I took classes in college, for example. So it's cool to see that not only people who got degrees in college in social work to specifically work in this field can also still be a part of this mission and this work and glean the knowledge from the experts.
One of the things that we do with our members, particularly with our Rape Crisis Center members, are these program visits. So I would love for you to tell us and the listeners a little bit more about program visits. Does this mean you're going to march around the state and yell at programs and nitpick them and be mean?
Absolutely. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Here we come. No, that's a great piece for us to kind of focus on because that's a huge benefit for rape crisis centers. And I think a lot of times when folks think about things like this, they may be like, ooh, is it an audit? This is kind of terrifying, things like that. But really what we have been able to do is thread the needle of making this like a time where we are in community with one another and we're looking at the services that are being offered. And then we can create reports based off of that of just like, where are those really great programmatic strengths and where are like those opportunities for growth in the next year or two? And then again, kind of offering that training and technical assistance alongside. We're not just being like, you have a problem with this, goodbye. We're saying, we're noticing that this is like a challenge for you. And sometimes it's not even the efforts of the program themselves. It might be, you know, the unique barriers within their county, other agencies that are involved. And so that's where we can provide those recommendations of maybe we're here with you and having those meetings with other folks to be able to make sure that we're here to serve survivors. So yes, basically we do a guided interview process at each rape crisis center, and we are able to review and look at things from the outside in. So we're looking at the brick and mortar buildings that your services are being held in and what are the environments for survivors looking like? Is it warm and comforting? Are there equipment pieces that are ADA compliant? Things like that. And we know that not every rape crisis center is going to check every box. Like no one is perfect. There are strengths and weaknesses to the design of each program. But it allows us just to give that like full in-depth look and say, this is, if you're looking to develop your strategic plan, here are some things to consider that you want to weave in, because then that also just helps them like guided focus and say, oh, great, if we want to really improve our services for survivors, here is a wonderful roadmap. So that's the goal with program visits. And so that process is basically a year long. It started with me and my other program visits coordinator, Jen Idemiller, where the two of us have basically sat and kind of like done a lot of materials preparation. We've been training rape crisis center directors on what to expect. We've also been scheduling not only the program visits themselves, so usually it's a day-long event where we're with the programs at their center. So we want to be really mindful of times that may be a higher escalated time. So some of our rape crisis centers have dual certifications. So they may be also preparing for audits from funders and things like that. So we don't want to also just show up and be like, hi, we're going to make things extra hard. But we try to find time and space with them. And then the reviewer panel is really, we want to make sure that there's at least 3 people a part of that interview. 2 people are a part of the OESV team, and 1 person is an external reviewer. And that external reviewer is someone who is working at a local rape crisis center, usually in a leadership position within their region. And the beauty of that and the benefit of that is that those 2 folks looking across each other from the table know what are the barriers in their community. They can empathize with some of the things that come up during an interview saying, oh my gosh, I'm having the exact same problem. And they can also provide that perspective of what does it mean to be a director in a center like this, and understanding what kind of feedback or things to evaluate look like. So that's why that kind of diverse reviewer team is so valuable. And then we visit all 32 of our accredited rape crisis centers, and that process should conclude at the end of March. We do recognize that the timing of this is a bit challenging. So while it's actually today, I don't know how it is, Lori, for you in Cleveland, but we've gotten our first snow here in Columbus. And so knowing that it can be the time for weather, illnesses, things like that, we also have some like holds in April to make sure that if we have to reschedule a visit, we don't want that to feel too stressful as well. We've already got those blocks. We've let folks know in the event that this happens, you've got an opportunity to still have your program visit. At the end of that process, folks will have reports that are done. We're working with a contractor to really like create a beautifully designed, very clear, like detailed report where those strengths and opportunities for growth are. And then what we do is we basically provide a high level report to the Attorney General's office and other funders, letting folks know who has gone through this process and who's been accredited. And then they kind of take that opportunity, and that can provide a stepping stone for rape crisis centers who want to apply for additional funding. So we are not a funder or a pass-through agency for any funding, but we just provide this review process that kind of helps them determine like who might be like good candidates for these funding opportunities. I've said a lot, so feel free to pull any of those strings if you want to know more.
Well, it's just making me realize that basically the rape crisis centers get it's like you get a team of consultants that do the same thing that you do and will come and do a deep dive of your sexual violence services, tell you where you're doing great and keep going, and tell you, okay, here's the areas where you might be struggling, and here's some suggestions that we can actually work together on to solve. That's a huge benefit. That's like big money if you were to go pay actually a team of consultants to come and do that. So I hadn't really thought about it that way yet, to be honest. And a lot of people don't get that. And of course, some of the programs are dual programs, or they have other things that they're doing at their organization. But at least for the sexual violence services aspect, we are really digging in.
Taylor, I was going to say the same thing when Natasha framed program visits as being a benefit of membership. I was like, what? And then she started talking and I was like, you know what? You're so right. I was a program reviewer for the first time 2 years ago. Being at the coalition level, I don't get the opportunity to see what the boots on the ground are doing in the day-to-day. So getting to just sit at a table with some snacks and chatting about the cool things that they're doing for survivors, the ways that they're helping survivors, having that conversation was really enjoyable. And I think, yeah, there was nothing to be afraid of. How often do you get the chance to just speak highly about all the cool work that you're doing and be honest about places where you might need some support and know that the people who are there can support you?
Right. The response is going to be help.
Yes.
I still feel connected to the people that I like visited their programs or they were a part of the reviewer team with me. So that has been really cool. And I remember also realizing going program to program that I was able to pull threads together for people and say, wait, you just said something really cool that you're doing that XYZ program is struggling with, or the example that I'm thinking about, basically the whole state is struggling with. And I was like, please share this. Can we please put this on a platform and you share what you've been doing and how you've been doing it because everybody can benefit. And even though the programs get together in various aspects, whether it's the Rape Crisis Center directors meetings or the collective calls or our conference, that cross-organization work and discussion is happening, but there can always be a use for more detail, more information, like more information finding. So I just remember that being really cool. And I don't think that would have came out outside of that conversation because that person had no idea that they were like, it's just a thing that we do, it was no big deal to them, but they had it going well in their county and others didn't. So it's just a great opportunity. I was thinking of something else, Natasha, and you may or may not have an answer for this, but if somebody is listening who works at a rape crisis center, a qualified rape crisis center that is on our list of 32, and they haven't heard any inkling about these program visits at their organization, what can they do? Do they need to reach out to somebody? Would there be a benefit? I'm sure that is possible. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
That's a really great question, Taylor. First off, I would say, oh no, we haven't done our job right, because we do want to make sure that there is that full saturation for program staff. So along this process, one of the things that we did ask our directors to do is provide us an updated staff list. And that means anybody who kind of has contact with survivors, particularly, but then also anyone who's doing administrative work as well within your agency that touches like fiscal policies or things like that. So we had that full staff list. We submitted a survey to all staff at their rape crisis centers to ask them to do an internal review of these questions that we'll be asking during the review process, and how are they feeling that in their specific role. So that can look very different for a third shift person who takes the hotline versus somebody who is a preventionist in schools, or someone who is doing more legal or aftercare advocacy, like long-term pieces. So it allows us to get that hopefully 360 view, because we've also will then have those interviews with program representatives. The ask has been that not only are directors part of that interview process, but at least 1 to 3 other staff are going to be a part of that as well. So for some programs, like that may be a good chunk of their staff. So hopefully we are seeing some of that staff saturation and it's not a surprise. We do have some programs, particularly in our larger metropolitan areas, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, who do have larger staffs or larger county coverage. I could see, Taylor, in those opportunities where maybe they aren't as informed. Hopefully they would have received our survey. Hopefully we would ask. One of the things we've also talked to directors about is that a lot of communication has been coming out about this, or will be, especially via email. So to prepare their staff, do you have staff meetings? Make sure leadership is informing folks, because we also don't want that to feel like a surprise when we open the door at 10 a.m. and they're like, who are you? We've tried to think about like, what is the way to effectively communicate that this process is happening, and where do we see people plugging in? One of the things we also have prioritized, and it's even written into our interview guide and things like that, is that there has to be at least 15 minutes where we are not asking a single question. It is, hi, hello, how are you? It is rapport building. It is that gathering around snacks and introducing one another, talking about us as humans and individuals. So yeah, we want to meet all of the staff. We want to make sure the staff are well informed, and we're making sure that their feedback, if folks have completed this survey. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've not received a survey, I would highly encourage you to reach out to us at programvisits@oaesv.org, because what we do is we take those survey results, which are anonymous, and we also give them to our program reviewers, so that when we're in an interview process and maybe folks are saying, yeah, we have a 24-hour helpline and this is how it operates, but some of the feedback that we get from folks is that coverage is really hard. We can take that very specific feedback and say, it sounds like some of the staff feedback has been that it can be hard to schedule shifts or coverage. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those barriers look like. And we can get really specific in our training and technical assistance on that. We are trying to reach as many people as we can. We hope that this feels like a well-announced process and that everyone feels good about what the next few months entail.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm thinking too, if there are pieces of your work that you want to make sure are highlighted, I would think that it would be great for you to reach out to the leadership at your organization and say, hey, I know there's a lot going on. I just want to make sure that you have these bullet points about what we're doing in case you want to share that during the program visit. So it'd be cool to hear. We can't always hear from everyone in every format. We won't see everyone maybe in person, but definitely want to hear those nuggets if we can.
So I remember during our last program visit, one of the outcomes was that we got 2 new rape crisis centers. I'd love to hear how something like that can happen and just share a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I was actually kind of had that in the back of my mind, Lori, when you were mentioning like how the process felt before and how people get in touch with this. It was like, wow, actually, from doing this process 2 years ago to now, we had these 2 new programs that got folded in. We have the Brenda Glass Trauma Recovery Center and we have Square One. And TCN behavioral health. Maybe Square One came in after or before that time, but it's beautiful. Well, that's the beauty of this is that it is not stagnant programs that just continuously get funded, not evaluated, all these other things. It's an ever evolving process and folks are allowed to participate in that. So right. We look at folks that are providing these services within their community. A lot of times we'll also get recommendations from some funders or from programs themselves. They may get connected with us as an affiliate. So TCN and the Brenda Glass TRC, folks that were kind of in that affiliate fringe kind of space, and we started to hear more about the programs they're doing and hearing about the expansion. Some folks, were able to add in more services, or some folks had more of that lens of working with specific populations. And so that's when we're like, ooh, we're intrigued. We need to meet. So typically how this process ends up looking is we have kind of a pre-meeting or pre-visit that usually includes our president and CEO, Rosa Beltre. And I have been kind of put into that fold over this past couple months. And what we do is we have kind of a version of program visits, but much more scaled down. It's more open to hear how are they serving their communities. We provide a little bit more guidance on the core standards, which is our authoritative document that has been created by OESV and a committee of folks and has gone through several revisions to make sure that it does not matter where a survivor lives, that they should have access to these services and that they are consistent. We hear a little bit about what the program does. We talk about where the core standards are, and we see where that Venn diagram is for them currently, and what are some places that we would want to see opportunities for growth for them to be then in that fully accredited state. So depending upon when we hear their information, when we have that pre-visit, sometimes we'll basically give guidance and say, hey, here are some things that we want you to focus on. If you need support in that development, let us know. And then once you've reached this point where you're like, yes, we're feeling confident, we have this new service, we have this new MOU with a community agency, whatever kind of parts we ask them to work on, that's when we bring them in more formally into the fold. So as Taylor mentioned, joining our rape crisis director meetings, which happen at least 4 times a year, also with connection points at our conference, things like that. We ask that their staff go through a 40-hour training institute. If they don't have that in-house, asking them to take it through OAESV, which we offer twice a year. And then depending upon where the program visit process is, because we've said it's kind of biannual, every 2 years, not twice every year, then we make sure that they get that full assessment and they do the exact same thing our other centers are. So it'll be interesting to see where we are 2 years from now if we can grow more rape crisis centers across the state who feel like they can provide those full suite of services and want to be in this movement more deeply.
And I will say it's been really cool to learn about, especially those 3 newer programs and what they've been doing and how much they've been able to do, like without even being connected to the rest of the qualified RCC world in Ohio. And I will say I've noticed that the directors of those programs, so shout out Ashley Durst, Debbie Brownlee, and Brenda Glass, have been really present and engaged at the Rape Crisis Centers directors meetings, the trainings, like they're all in, and that's really cool to see. And another really cool part of that for Square One and TCN in particular is that I think a lot of that info gathering and learning more about them occurred through our rural program. So we do a lot of work trying to reach out to rural areas of Ohio, since that's the majority of the state. That's also where we see less services happening. We see a lack of qualified rape crisis centers in those areas, for example, and just overall underserved areas for sure. But so we do a lot of outreach there, a lot of trying to fill gaps in services, and through all of that, found out about these two programs. So yeah, it's just really, really cool to see how it can all come together. And now that means too that, you might be thinking like, what's the difference? Those programs were already in existence. They were already doing something. Well, with the qualified rape crisis centers and the core standards that we have, we know then that those programs are meeting these best practices standards that we're asking. So they may have already been doing that, but even then, we like to think that's going to be expanded. That's going to exponentially improve. So those survivors are getting even better services, and maybe they can serve even more survivors too, especially with the access then to the state rape crisis centers line item funding.
You took the words out of my mouth, Taylor. I think we were about to say the same thing. I was going to share how, there may be programs that are offering or meeting like many of our core standards without even realizing they are, but perhaps they don't have a 24-hour crisis hotline. So, we can work with them to say, are you interested in getting there? How can we help you establish a crisis line? And by checking off that core standard, voila, they can be put on our map and they can be considered a qualified rape crisis center in the state of Ohio, which I think is really cool. Because as we know, we're seeing survivors everywhere. So those programs probably are serving survivors and either aware of it or not aware of it. And by being able to provide the full scope of services, we can make sure that a survivor can enter any of those rape crisis centers across Ohio and receive the same type of care.
I know there's a lot more that could be said, but for the purposes of this podcast episode, is there anything else that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I guess if folks are interested in what we're going to kind of be up to over the next year or so, I know that really our member engagement strategies are evolving, and we're trying to really create a strategic plan thinking about our members intentionally and what are some of the pieces that hit one of two buckets. One, what does support look like for these agencies? So when I met with the rape crisis directors over summer, I ran an activity where we basically kind of asked, like, what are the things that you're hoping to see or have support on? And a lot of times it is, doing things like program visits, providing TA, but also it's showing up for the wins. And so we're making sure to be really thinking about outreach strategies and supporting and uplifting all of the beautiful work that our agencies are doing, and trying to think about how to also kind of like bring along other like community support as well. So sometimes our rape crisis centers are doing a great job, but then like they may have a giant service area. And so how do we make sure that saturation is across their county or multiple counties? So really trying to highlight the amazing work that they're doing, not only internally at our org, but just out in the community. And yeah, taking those program visit opportunities as a lovely way of thinking about technical assistance over the next year. That's also going to help inform our programming. So I always wear two hats while I'm on the clock. And so I'm always thinking about what are those next steps that folks want more training on. Usually a lot of times it's these topics that become emergent. And so some of those things come up during program visits. And so that allows us also to think more like, interesting, let's think about like what some of these intersections of sexual violence and other victimizations look like, and creating a training from there, or other, whatever kind of naturally comes from that. And we'll have that larger state report that we'll get to release and see like, what are some of the trends we just see in Ohio? And it doesn't have to be just on us to do things. It can also be other directors seeing that and saying, whoa, I didn't really know that this impacted our region so much. Let's come together and make sure that our coordinated community response teams know more about this. Our sexual assault response teams know more about this. So I'm thinking about that, but then also just trying to think about ways to bring in more unique voices. So as we mentioned, kind of that affiliate tier, not everybody is ready to provide those full suite of services, but I also think that we need to do a better job of uplifting those folks. Like we said, some of these agencies have done community work for a really long time, and they may have crossover with the survivors in our community. So how can we lift them up and the very intentional services or outreach things that they do? So those are kinds of the things that I'm thinking about and how they kind of intersect with our membership and with the program visit process. So very excited to see over the course of the next year or so how we start to think about membership and how we can be here for the state of Ohio.
And it's important to connect affiliate members with our RCCs so they're aware of each other and referrals can be made, and we can make sure survivors are reaching the specific organization that will best suit what they're looking for too.
Absolutely. We actually have 2 agencies right now that are developing MOUs with current affiliates. We did an interview process with some of the folks and said, hey, are you interested in becoming a rape crisis center based off capacity and other focuses? That was not where they were, but they had other rape crisis centers near them. And so developing those very specific, like, where are you coming in? Do our materials match? Can there be a continuum of care is so important. So glad you uplifted that, Lori.
Definitely. Well, it was a pleasure chatting with you as always. I want to shout out just 2 links if people are interested in learning more. If you want to check out our core standards, you can go to oaesv.org/core standards. And if you'd like to check out our map of rape crisis centers, you can go to oaesv.org/map. Our links are always very straightforward. You can usually just type / whatever you're trying to find, and you'll get there. Bye, everyone. Stay warm on this random, but not so random, snowy day in November.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Teal Talk. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into intersectional issues affecting survivors in Ohio. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review, recommend us to a friend, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at OAESV and Twitter at Ohio Alliance ESV. If you'd like to learn more about us and the services we offer, sign up for our email list, or read a transcript of this episode, visit oaesv.org.
Want to share a comment or ask a question for a future episode? Just click on the link in the show notes to leave us a voicemail. And remember, we're here to help. Feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. See you next time.